Hello and welcome to our podcast. I'm your host Timbo and I'm talking to...
I'm Anita Horan, I'm Timbo's wife. I'm an anti-plastic activist.
Welcome, Anita, to our second recorded conversation from the kitchen.
Yeah, it took us a few weeks to get around to this one. Life has been so busy, but we had lots of motivation to do it based on the response we received from our first podcast.
So I was surprised at how much positive feedback I personally actually received from people after they listened to our first recording. Part of me felt no one would actually be interested in what we had to say.
Yeah, well, it's really hard to gauge via social media actually, because a lot of posts, people don't engage with them or interact with them, so you don't know if they've seen the post or if they like the post. And so we shared the podcast on social media and not a lot of people actually clicked like, but then we started getting in the comments and the comments were just so positive and they were just wonderful. So yeah, people actually did take the time to listen, which we really appreciated. And then to get positive feedback was just fantastic.
One critique I did receive, and it was a minor one, is that we claimed we were having this conversation in the kitchen, and one of my work colleagues actually felt there was no evidence that we were speaking in the kitchen. So
That's
I've
funny.
actually got a glass of water here, and
I've got icy water too.
I'm just clinking it with my teacup. I can assure
This is the kitchen table.
dear listeners, we are speaking from the kitchen. Okay, thank you.
It's just that Tim is very, very good at his technical ability and he has wonderful audio setup. So it sounds really clean, but we're definitely in the kitchen.
Yeah, so it's interesting, once again, mentioning social media, I feel that we're going to be talking about social media a lot. As I mentioned last time, it is my day job. You yourself use it heavily for your activism work, your focus on the ongoing plastic apocalypse,
Yes.
for want of a better term. Something I really enjoy about social media is not only reading about but seeing the work activists are doing around the world. Something that I feel passionate about is the plight of a particular marine creature, the shark. It's probably one of my favourite animals, really.
Yeah, and actually you're so passionate about it that our daughter absorbed that passion, and she actually, she was quite young, and she's very shy. She insisted that you take her to a shark protest to protect the sharks. So you definitely, you've passed that on even to your child. So yeah, the love of marine life and sharks is in the family.
Yes, that protest, that was on Manly Beach. That was a few years ago, and that was in response to the West Australian government. They were attempting to do something about, or what they termed as a shark problem, and so they would actually catch sharks on baited drum lines, and then when they would haul the shark up, they would shoot the shark in the head and dump the carcass. But the thing is, the shark they were targeting, the white pointer, they did not catch a single white pointer on these drum lines, but they caught dozens of tiger sharks. And so these tiger sharks were caught and killed really as a PR exercise. And the target species, the white pointer, not that I think they should be targeting white pointers anyway, they didn't catch those either. But that was quite an emotional experience for me, actually attending a demonstration or a protest, because I never had done that until then, and actually standing on the beach with my daughter surrounded by people that had just as much empathy for sharks as me. It was really overwhelming, and it was very difficult to describe that feeling. So
you're quite a shy person yourself and you avoid crowds, so that would have been a big deal for you. I know it would have. And also I guess having the emotion of being with your daughter who's quite shy but then was vocal and screaming out in protest in defence of the sharks too. I can imagine that would have been a pretty intense and emotional situation for you.
Yes, she took an old bed sheet and on a scrap piece of paper she planned out what her protest banner was going to be, and she sketched that out, but then she redrew it at a much larger size on the old bed sheet using fabric paint. And yeah, it was quite quite amazing to see our daughter do that.
And you needed two people to hold it open because it was a big sheet. So were you on one end and she was on the other?
Yes, and if you use this magical tool called Google and you dug deep enough, you would probably find the photo of me standing on the beach with her holding this banner aloft.
Maybe we could actually put the photo with this podcast.
We'll try and find it. I think one of the local papers, it was the Manly Daily, one of the News Corporation papers, had a photo of us. But as I said, this was a few years ago, and looking at social media, particularly Instagram, I really enjoy following people and organisations on Instagram who are trying their best really to expose or reveal to people the plight of the shark, because sharks are actually indiscriminately killed all the time. One of the big reasons they're caught and killed is for their appendages, particularly their fins.
Oh, shark fin soup's just horrendous.
Yeah, so the creature is brought on board alive, and then the fins are hacked off, and then it's an amputee then. It's just dumped in the water with no swimming appendages and to drown or to be eaten by other sharks. But there is demand for the shark fin, particularly from China, but sharks are actually end up in a lot of fish and chip shops as well. And in fact there's even seafood outlets around Australia where if you go to the right one, you'll actually be able to buy fillets from large sharks. They could be tiger sharks, could be mako, whatever. So even if we're not consuming shark fin soup, either knowingly or unknowingly, we're probably eating endangered sharks when we get fish and chips.
Well, and actually I just saw someone's Instagram page, and they were a fisherman, and they had a photo of a beautiful big shark they had just caught, and they were beaming, and they called it flake. So that's what's usually used in fish and chips in takeaway shops, isn't it? Flake is actually often shark or always shark.
Yes, and it's not just food either. It's the pharmaceutical industry. They release products.
Chondroitin, is it?
That's it. And you take these capsules, or you can take it in powder form, and this is supposedly derived from sharks. And, if you have issues with your joints, as we all do when we get older, it's meant to bring relief. But the funny thing is, because they sell a lot of these tablets and they can't always access sharks, they end up catching other species like rays, like flat sharks, and then just claiming it's from actual sharks, and they still use that. So it's really a big money-making business. And there's another aspect to this where part of the shark ends up in cosmetics as well. So, yeah, the shark's being hammered. But anyway, what I really wanted to talk about is the work of activists in this area. I follow a lot of activists on Instagram who are exposing the plight of the shark, and I'm sympathetic to their work. But one thing I've noticed lately, which disturbed me, is there seems to be a division amongst activists. I want to talk about this in a wider context, but with shark activists, there is the pure approach where you talk about and expose all the horrendous things happening to sharks, the amount that are caught and killed, and that information would be enough to inspire people to change their behaviour. Like, for instance, FedEx, who send parcels all around the world. There was a social media campaign trying to get FedEx to cease shipping shark-related products. So, So a lot of this activism is quite clever. It's closing the loop, dealing with the problem. But then there are other activists who actually go and swim with sharks.
Oh, you know, a couple of them. Actually, they're beautiful-looking women who go swimming with enormous sharks.
Yeah, and like I confess, I love looking at that imagery. I love sharks. I love the ocean. Seeing someone swim beside a shark, I just think is fantastic. But a couple of weeks ago, a group of divers, free divers, they were out in their boat off the coast of one of the Hawaiian Islands, and there was a dead humpback. And so when a whale dies, its carcass begins to rot. But the sharks are like the cleanup crew of the ocean, so naturally a big whale carcass in the water would attract sharks. And they have a feed. And these divers were fortunate because an enormous white pointer or what we call either a white shark or a great white shark had actually come to feed on the whale carcass. And so this was a rare opportunity for the freedivers, and they slipped into the water and they swam beside this incredible creature. It was enormous. It was one of the largest white sharks ever filmed.
I saw a photo. It was so big it looked like she could have been pregnant. Like the diameter of the stomach was enormous.
I'm unsure. Someone could correct me in the comments on this podcast. The shark did look like it was pregnant, but it might have gorged itself on the whale.
Just been really full.
Also, so it's hard to say. But either way, the shark was very relaxed. And there were 2 dolphins accompanying this enormous shark as well, and they were repeatedly diving down to the shark and probably harassing it, but the shark was ignoring the dolphins, and the dolphins obviously didn't seem to be terrified of the shark. Anyway, these free divers swam beside the shark and they took this amazing footage in this open blue water. The water clarity was superb, and this footage and these photos went all around the world and was taken up by major media outlets. And I myself just thought it was really inspiring. I myself would have liked to have been there with them in that situation. But it did create a bit of a fuss on social media, and the 2 different streams of shark activism really took it as an opportunity to criticise each other. One of the freedivers actually touched the white pointer while she was swimming beside it. I mean, she wasn't hugging it, she just briefly touched it.
But I saw the footage, and this wasn't someone harassing a shark. It wasn't someone going up and going, I'll just pat this shark for, just the thrill. She actually looked like she had a beautiful, relaxed connection with the shark, and that the shark actually felt the same about her. It actually looked like a beautiful moment of exchange. Didn't it look like harassment at all?
That was my take on it as well. And there was other footage that wasn't broadcast as widely as the main piece of footage, and there was an incredible piece of footage where the pointy end of the shark comes towards her,
yes,
almost touching her.
So that infers that the shark was actually interested in her enough to go to her in a friendly manner.
Well, it appeared that way, and then just as, I wouldn't say safety, but just as part of the dive, this lady, she gently redirected it with her hand in that situation.
Which was pretty amazing, seeing a white pointer's coming straight at you and your response is just to gently make sure it doesn't bump into your face. Like, most people wouldn't react like that when a white pointer's coming straight toward them.
Yes, but then the sort of comments that were left on the original posts, it saddened me, because this lady in particular and the people with her, I'm not going to name any names, I'm just going to talk about the situation. She received criticism because people felt that she was engaged, in a risky pursuit, and that people would copy her and just leap into the water with a white pointer whenever they saw one, and B, they felt it was disrespectful to touch a shark, and C, she only did it for the likes or engagement on social media. And I suppose it's that last point that really annoys me, because the whole point of using social media is to broadcast what you're doing. So if this lady and her colleagues had an incredible once-in-a-lifetime experience, well, why wouldn't she want to share it with everyone?
And activists like us, there's so much time and effort that goes into spreading the word behind the scenes that no one knows about. Hundreds of hours of activism from your home computer, or speaking with people, or trying to line up news articles. So when you get a moment like that, that's your opportunity to actually show the world what you're trying to achieve and what your message is. Those moments are gold, because that's your chance to show the world the message that you've been working on in your private time so much.
Exactly, and I'm really holding back here. I don't know just how angry I should get for our audience, but it's this attitude.
It's okay, let it out.
This attitude really gets up my nose, because there's this expectation that if you are standing for something, if you're an activist and you want to improve some aspect of the world, you have to be 100% pure before you can take a stand.
Oh, that makes me so mad, that attitude.
something. And it's this weird sort of almost religious orthodoxy that is actually being amplified on social media, particularly among people who really do want to make the world better. It just really makes me scratch my head. Like, for instance, another group of activists who disagreed with the activities of this lady swimming with a white pointer, they were coalescing around another person who I have the utmost respect for as well. And this other lady has actually chosen to improve the plight of the shark by taking people to a remote area in Indonesia, and there's poor fishermen whose income relies solely on killing sharks. But, you know, they're living in poverty, so they're going to do the thing that they get money for to support their family. And her idea, which I just think is brilliant, is that she would take tourists, eco-tourists, with her to this remote village, and they would pay these poor fishermen to take them out on the shark fishing boat, but not to fish for sharks. So they're paying them an income, but not to catch sharks. They're paying them to take them out on the water, show them where the sharks are, and then they can go for a swim.
What a absolutely amazing thing to do. Like, how hard would that be to make that a reality? Like, the logistics in doing that, like, that's an incredible thing for someone to take on.
Yeah. Look, in the notes to this podcast, I'll probably have links to both people. I just don't want to...
Yeah, that's not name names.
I don't want to name names.
Yeah.
But my point is, why can't you do both? These problems that we face, environmental problems in particular, they're so big that lots of people can be working on their own little corner of the puzzle.
And what I found even more interesting is that the person who was setting up the tours was actually someone who has frequently, very frequently, shown footage of herself swimming with sharks to try to help people to have empathy for sharks and understand sharks and develop a love for sharks. But I almost felt like the frenzy of supporters to the activist actually like revved her up to give a public response. I don't even know if she was going to jump up and criticise the other woman herself, but her followers are like, what are you going to say about this? And then I think she felt pressured to like make a public statement. So I kind of thought that was a bit kind of cruel to put that pressure on her. And she also had behaved in, not vastly different behaviour herself.
Yeah. Well, you yourself have actually been exposed to this attitude because your goal is to make everyone aware of the excessive use of plastic in our culture, particularly in the supermarkets, all the fresh produce, not all the fresh produce, most of it now being wrapped in plastic. And you yourself have actually received criticism from people who feel that you are not qualified to talk about this because A, you're not completely zero waste. There are people who are completely zero waste who have like almost eliminated every single piece of waste. And how amazing is that? And they are astounding. Yeah. And I'm reluctant to even talk about this, but the sort of things you eat have singled you out for criticism as well.
Let's just go right into that. Yeah, I've received an immense amount of hate from vegans, but I've actually kind of made peace with it, and I've made friends with a lot of vegans, and I've actually moved a few steps toward veganism, and I've decided I don't actually have a problem with veganism. I have a problem with fundamentalism and aggression. And I actually wrote a blog post specifically about this issue about being attacked by vegans, and it was one of the most well-received posts I've ever written. So if you're interested, please hop onto my website and have a look. And it did so well because so many people related to the fact of like trying to improve your life to be more environmentally friendly, but then being attacked on social media for not being perfect. So it really resonated with a lot of people. This is a big issue for so many of us.
Well, it's beyond being perfect though, isn't it? Because
it's a person's perception of perfection.
Obviously, it's perception as well. Perception is everything. But I just can't help but think now with these tools where we have instant communication and you can share your opinion instantly, people gravitate towards this idea of purity. So no matter who you are, if you're a public figure or even anyone with an opinion, I should say, there's now this strange expectation that you have to be completely pure.
And I got some lovely fresh hate this week. There was a news story about some major corporations who are looking at, actually they are going to trial it, implementing reusable containers for food that is like everyday food, so ice cream, and they're even talking about having toothpaste converted into tablets in reusable containers. It's delivered to your home. You use up the goods, you keep the containers, and then you return them and they're washed and reused, which is just absolutely incredible, because this is what we've been fighting for. Maybe it's not exactly what we hoped the outcome would be. I think it would be better to do that at the supermarket or small businesses. But the fact that large corporations are even considering this is mind-blowing. And yeah, someone said to me on my page, I don't know how you can support this. You should be promoting everything local. People support local shops and local businesses. And I actually ended up, if people confront me in a respectful way, I'm very happy to talk. And so we ended up engaging in a nice discussion. And I thought this is such an interesting topic. I then made it into a post and I asked everyone, what do you think about this? And actually a lot of people pretty much agreed with both of us and agreed with me, or a bit of a mix, and thought that it would be good to support local businesses, but we think we're not in that world where we can make that successful immediately, and maybe it would be a stepping stone. Support these companies who are implementing reusable containers, and then that can be a step to implementing them in the local environment. So yeah, that was just a little bit of accusations I got toward me this week, that how can you support that when you say you're anti-plastic or pro the environment? But it's really just our perception of what we think solutions are, or what solutions are realistic in our day and age.
It just really disturbs me, though, how easily the human tribal impulse now surfaces over social media. Back to the shark and the lady swimming with the shark. I just felt that was some of the most beautiful imagery I have seen. The 8-year-old boy within me was like, wow, this is like an incredible adventure that these people partook of. I mean, they're adults, so they would have known there was a risk, but they chose to take the risk. The shark appeared satiated. It had already eaten a lot. The water was clear. It wasn't murky. But then I start reading other people's comments. And
never read the comments. So the comments, my goodness.
But there's actually no sense of wonder anymore. So I saw that imagery and I felt an innate sense of wonder. It was incredible. But people are so primed to attack, deconstruct and argue and select from two choices, either choice A or choice B. They can't be presented with information anymore that makes them reflect on how incredible the world is or what opportunities there are out there. It's just okay, who was out there saying the thing I don't like, and now I've got to take them down.
Yeah, that really just kind of blows my mind, because I don't go to other people's sites who have a different opinion than me and criticise them. I just think, why on earth would you do that? I just think that's fundamentally rude. And so for people to come to my page and attack me or that lady who did something amazing and attack her, I think that's pretty rude to someone who's just actually trying to do something really good, but then you disagree, so you get high and mighty and go criticise them publicly. I don't mind if it's on your own page and you maybe respectfully talk about a topic, but to attack a person outright, I think that's really rude.
It's probably naivety on my part, but I thought that these tools would actually change human behaviour, and they have changed human behaviour, there's no doubt about it. But
has it changed human behaviour, or has it given those of us who are the minority an opportunity to gravitate to other people who are the minority, who have similar views to us, and we can connect with them, so we feel like it's changing human behaviour?
Yeah, so perhaps it's just the same human behaviour, but it's actually amplified now.
And I think it's given little people like me who felt like they didn't fit anywhere in the world a place to find like-minded people to connect with. So that's how the effect it's had on me.
I just find this really disturbing because there are people doing good things and they work really hard to achieve their goals and try to make the world a better place for others. But I'm just going to come out and say it. Like, quite often it's the followers that congregate around those people that make things really bad. Because they fight with the followers of the other people.
Yeah. That's true. Like, if people attack me, for the first year or so, I'm so sensitive and I'm such a reactive person, and who likes to be attacked? I would actually try to defend myself. And then once you start and engage with someone who sets out to be aggressive towards you, it's only going to be amplified, and they're just going to be nastier to you no matter what you say. So now I've actually tried to not say so much. Yeah, and people will come to your defense and actually defend you, which can be a really good thing if it's done in a respectful manner. It actually can be really positive to have people congregate around you and protect you in a nice way. But, there's other situations, not on my page, on other pages, where the followers can actually be really, really nasty to people who have an opposing opinion.
I'm old enough to actually remember a time before social media, but I was a heavy user of the internet. So, you would access information through the web browser, whether that was Internet Explorer or some other program. And it almost, looking back through rose-coloured glasses, it almost seems like a golden age, because if you wanted to discover something, you would use a search engine. Google was quite new at the time, and you would just read constantly. But you could form your own opinion about the material you were reading. But now everything is served up to us by a newsfeed algorithm. And on top of that, you have all the comments and engagements. It's often the chatter about a subject rather than the substance of the subject itself. That is the thing. Actually, this is interesting. I was talking to an executive from a tech company a week ago, and they were talking about the trend of people wanting to move away from broadcast type apps. So a broadcast type app is if you use Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and you tweet or post, it's a broadcast because anyone can see it. But now there's a group of people turning off that, and they're preferring to use other platforms that are strictly messaging platforms because they can control who they're talking to. And I suppose you could argue, well, then that makes us a lot more insular, but I'm seeing the insular behaviour on the broadcast platforms anyway. So why wouldn't you step back and go to a messaging platform and talk to people you knew? While they might not agree with everything you say, they are already sympathetic to you as a source of ideas and discussion.
Yeah, so you're protecting yourself from the potential of being harassed and argued with and people being aggressive, but then you're also greatly reducing the opportunity to be heard. So I think it depends on what your motivation is and what your outcome goals are for social media. If you just want to, let's organise a group of us to go for dinner next week, well, a messaging app would be good. But if you're working on expanding social media for a cause, say, then it's probably, you're going to be limited as to who sees that. But at the same time, it's actually in the book I wrote, Plastic Girl, about my journey to get to this point with activism. And I recall, because it's always about fighting the algorithm, because Facebook tries to hide your posts, and you're always researching this because this is your job. And you told me that groups were hot and groups were really popular. They were trending.
Yes.
And the difference is that if I post something on my public Facebook page, Facebook will go, I might only show that to 5% of your followers, or maybe even less. And so hardly anyone sees your posts at times. But with a group, if you posted, then everyone in the group would be notified of your post. So you have a lot higher chance of people seeing your post, because it won't be hidden. They'll actually be told that you did post. But what that allowed is actually people like actually infiltrated the group. So I have my page, which has like 6,000 to 7,000 followers, but then I wanted to set up an activist group with people who were really committed and they were actually going to do things, and they were going to like really help the Plastic Free Produce campaign more and share posts and attend activities. And but yeah, someone, I don't know if it was one person or multiple people, actually infiltrated the group and spied on the group and took screenshots and actually sent the screenshots to other people to try to put a black mark against my name, and they would quote them out of context. So they would take a screenshot and then they would send it to someone, and then they would write something about the post and make it look like it actually was sinister when it was completely innocent. And yeah, so they like use this to sabotage my work, and I ended up like closing the group because it became so sinister, and they were messaging so many people horrible things about me, and even when I was doing like really innocent new posts, they would screenshot it and send it to people. So I just had to turn the tap off of content for them, because so then I closed the group and just kept everything public. And so then it was like, well, what's the point of you screenshotting it anyway, because it's already in the public domain. So yeah, anyway, so that's just like public pages, private messaging and groups. So
yeah, it's almost like we need another tool that will filter the comments. I'm not talking about censoring the comments, because there might be hundreds of comments on a post, and the tool would have enough intelligence or sophistication to serve you up all the comments worthy of replying to, but it would have to be sophisticated enough that it could also identify comments that were disagreeing with you, but they were disagreeing with you in a civilized manner.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I'm like fine if someone wants to have a talk and like discuss different opinions, but I won't tolerate disrespect at all. You don't come at me and like attack me in a disrespectful manner and expect me to just smile and nod. That's in my post-Christian days. I won't turn the other cheek anymore these days. So if you give it to me, I'm either going to block you, delete you, or I'm going to give it back. So if you want to have a conversation, well, I will treat you with respect, and I expect respect back.
Yeah, a conversation. It seems that the art of conversation is being lost because we've now moved to this world where everything is polarised. I really don't want to talk about politics because that'll probably create hateful comments on this podcast.
But controversy is good, so go ahead.
Well, you look at the US political system and the figure of Donald Trump and how unlikely it seemed that he was actually going to win the election. He won the election. But anyway, the quality of political discussion from an outsider, I'm not from the US, I'm from Australia, but looking outside in, it just seems ridiculous. To the point where even people within the US have coined a term, they call it Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. So people can't even discuss Trump without degenerating
and
into...
frothing at the mouth.
Yeah, without frothing at the mouth and laying down on the ground in the fetal position. And I'm seeing that attitude crop up in other places. I'm seeing it crop up in Australia. I'm seeing it crop up amongst activists. So it's this demonising the other, but you should be able to talk about someone that you don't like or you disagree with or you think they're a bad influence, whatever your position is. But people can't anymore.
It just seems to, more often than not, degrade, this is one of my bugbears, into calling the person an idiot. You're an idiot, you're an effing idiot, you're a bloody idiot. And if people degrade themselves to actually start using the term idiot or like really base insults, well, I think that's kind of reflects badly on the person, that they're not capable of intellectual debate anymore. If you just have to revert to ad hominems to elevate yourself over the other person. So, but I think we are kind of living in the age of idiocracy, and that really is what people like.
But it does now, though, seem to be a feature of our time. I would go as far to say it's not even a bug, because it's so prevalent, it seems to be a feature.
It is
not
a feature.
a bug.
Yeah, it is a feature.
And it's, unfortunately it's being aided and abetted by people online that, well, they act like trolls, really.
I just think that word is too polite. I really dislike the word troll because that is almost like sinister with a bit of cuteness. But the way some of these trolls behave is actually, I think it's evil. They should just be called like digital arseholes or something.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just digressed for a moment. I just had to get that out.
Yeah, this is overlapping with like a really strange book. I don't know if I call it strange. A really confronting book that I read years ago. I think I gave it to you to read as well. It was this book called The Lucifer Principle.
Yes, it took me a while to get into that, and it was very challenging, and it was very good. Yeah,
by a gentleman named Howard Bloom. Now, this is one of the few books I'm aware of that when you discuss it with someone, like this happened to me. I was actually discussing the contents of this book with someone late at night, sitting at a table outside a pub. There was 3 of us, and the person I was talking to claimed they'd read it, but then I was explaining what I thought the book was talking about, and then the third person who was interested in our conversation was exploring the concepts of the book with us, and it actually degenerated into a verbal fight. Not that I was fighting, but one of our party actually got up in a huff from the table and left, stormed off because he didn't like what we were talking about. But we were actually talking about the contents of this book, and so it's like gelignite. But this whole subject of people being polarised and arguing with each other, and it's reaching such a fever pitch, it reminds me of this book because this author, Howard Bloom, through a lot of research and quoting like a lot of scientists, posited that this was actually a feature of nature, and what he means by that is that you would have groups of people that would war with and contend with each other, and it's this pushing against each other. They're acting like 2 giant organisms, even though you might be dealing with millions of people on different sides. These groups, collectively, they're like giant super organisms that go to war with each other. And this is a controversial aspect. This is nature's way of like discovering novelty or new iterations or new ways to do things, and it's actually smuggling this process in under the cover of ideology. So we know about genes, like genetic material being passed on and circulated, but this is really like memes, mimetic information contending with each other. Anyway, it was a really difficult book. It was really confronting, but after I read it, I couldn't entirely rule out its premise.
That's true, yeah. And so, you see it. You want to deny it and argue with it when you're reading it, but then you see the evidence around you, and even in like your local town or any environment that you enter, you see the dynamics at play, and you're like, oh, I can't really argue with what he was saying.
Yeah, so to get really dark, for instance, you have like polarised political opinions, and it just reaches a fever pitch in a country, and then it reaches this low point where you're actually at a point of civil war, and then the pressure cooker of that situation, the civil war, causes other people or other groups to emerge. And novelty is not really the right word, but from a biological point of view, it's like novelty. And so the superorganisms, they can create all these variations, but for the component parts of the organism, us, it's awful because like people die, people get hurt, their lives get destroyed, but
we don't know we're playing our part in this superorganism, but we are.
We're actually pieces in a much larger game. And Howard Bloom, in this book, The Lucifer Principle, he had a term. It wasn't his term. It comes from somewhere else. It was called entelechy. So entelechy deals with this idea of emergent properties. So you could have lots of tiny little pieces, lots of little components of something, and you put them all together, but there is something that emerges from them that is actually greater than the sum of the parts that went into it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so, I just have this uncomfortable feeling when we witness all this polarised opinion, whether it's about the environment, it's about politics, it's even humanity's place within the biosphere. We're seeing some pretty extreme statements being made about people.
Do you find it interesting, though, that even though we are living in an age of outrage, that we are also living in an age of possibly unprecedented acceptance of minority groups and of unique, unusual individual behaviour?
Yeah, well, yeah, possibly. I mean, everything...
Like the Me Too movement. So we've got so many different cultures in Australia, and, you know, we had the Bondi riots where there was just so much hate and violence, but then maybe a decade later, not very long in the stream of history, we're now living in an age where it's actually a lot more socially acceptable and almost expected to be kind and open and welcoming to people who have different beliefs, different nationalities, different sexualities. So we're living in an age of unprecedented acceptance. And even myself, with my history, my past, I feel that society is, I wouldn't have said this 10 years ago, but now I feel society is more willing to accept my uniqueness than in the really past. So you've got the age of outrage and hate and aggression, but then you've also got simultaneously an age of like acceptance and welcoming. So how do they go together? How does that work?
Yeah, well, see, that's what I find alarming. So
even those whole worldviews are polarised.
Yeah, so you could argue, as you have, that people in general are actually getting better.
But at the same time, they're getting worse. So how is that possible?
But then the people who don't subscribe to these values and want to get along with everyone, their voice is much louder as well. So I think, and this is just me throwing this out here, so please don't anyone scream at me, but you can respectfully argue with me. I think this trajectory is following the trajectory of warfare. And what I mean by that is, in the past, before the 20th century, armies contending with and fighting each other on the battlefield, it was a really bloody affair in terms of everybody being affected. So people in the countryside, the soldiers, you had bayonets, you had swords, you had soldiers on horseback, and the possibility of losing your life in a conflict was great. But when we get to the 20th century and warfare changes, more people die in war than in previous wars because of mechanisation, bombs and tanks and that. But the people making the decision to go to war, those decisions are in fewer and fewer hands. So my theory, and it's just a theory, is less and less people are actually interested in going to war with other countries, because, like, why would you? But at the same time, the ability to begin a devastating war is higher than ever, which is paradoxical because less and less people actually want to go to war, but the actual final decision
is made by very few.
People,
it's true.
And because of technology at their fingertips,
they can implement it easily.
Like, if they do make a decision to create another war, it would just be completely devastating, but that's not because everyone wants to join in.
Yeah.
So I think that is what's happening with opinion. You know, people possibly are getting better, but then the voices, the deranged voices, they might be fewer in number, but they get louder. And
also the deranged voices, I'm going to say, you know, that's kind of sinister. They're the baddies and the aggressors. But also I think you mentioned it, the voices of those who are promoting understanding and acceptance, they're getting louder too. So actually, I'm a prime example. Like, I've come from an extremely pacifist background where we were told not to rock the boat, not to cause any trouble, not to speak up. You had to follow the rules, absolutely 100%. Your life depended on it. So many things depended on you following the rules and just shutting up. But like me, I've found my voice and I'm being loud and I'm being vocal, and maybe I'm almost symbolic of like where we are in the stream of time, where those of us who were like fighting for something good, or maybe everyone thinks they're fighting for something good, but positive steps toward the environment or social acceptance, maybe we're getting more courage because we feel that we will be allowed to be heard more.
Yeah, so it's this friction that happens, isn't it? So the ability to do good and share your voice, as you say, is at the highest point it's ever been, really, in history. But with that opportunity, a lot of bad stuff happens at the same time.
Yeah, I'm going to raise something extremely controversial, and I'm not even going to give my opinion on it. But we recently had the legislation proposed for gay marriage, and there was so much vitriol and hate and public aggression projected from both sides toward the other sides, and threats, physical threats to politicians who were representing each side. And so even in an issue that is about understanding and acceptance, there can still be hatred fueled behind it to force those opinions. So maybe that we're circling now back to fundamentalism. So even if it's an issue that we think might be kindness based, we can still be too aggressive with how we present that message.
And I think that leaders, political leaders particularly, are aware of this.
I remember you were actually thinking that the politicians were egging on this public fight.
They could have diffused that situation by not having the plebiscite. They could have just passed a law. We would have woken up the next day, everything would have been the same, and then we would have been spared months and months of this subject. It's almost like, this is what I'm talking about with war. It's almost like political leaders, they know what buttons to push, and they'll push them for reasons clear to them.
I'm sure they do know what buttons to push.
Well, there's so many places we could go with this subject. I think we should have a break, but continue this in part 2. Where can people find out about you?
So my website is anitahoran.com, but the things that is really most important to me is I've spent a lot of time writing 2 books. So one's called Is This Me?, which is a memoir. We might even get to talk about that coming up. And the other one is called Plastic Girl. They're both eBooks available on Amazon.
Okay, and we'll have links to those books in the show notes. I haven't written a book, but if you do want to find me online, Instagram is the best place, where I am Timbo, Timbo, Horan, Horan. Until next time.